October 14, 1943, 6:47 a.m., Mamayev Kurgan, Stalingrad. Vasily Zaitsev pressed his cheek against the cold wood stock of his Mosin Nagant, feeling the modified PU scope dig into his eyebrow. Through the 3.5x magnification, he watched a German Hauptmann, a captain, lighting a cigarette 900 meters away. The officer's hand trembled slightly. Smart man, he knew Soviet snipers owned these ruins. What he didn't know was that the rifle aimed at his skull could reach 400 yards farther than any weapon his army carried. The statistics were brutal. Between September and October 1943, German forces lost 214 officers in the Stalingrad sector to sniper fire. The Wehrmacht High Command couldn't understand it. Their Mauser K98K rifles with ZF-41 scopes were precision instruments, effective to 600 meters. Soviet standard-issue Mosin Nagants shouldn't have been able to compete. But something had changed in the rubble of Stalingrad. German officers were dying at distances that should have been impossible. Before we continue with Vasily Zaitsev's incredible story, we need your help to keep these forgotten heroes alive. If you're already hooked by what you're hearing, hit that like button right now. It tells YouTube to share this with more people who care about real history. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story of courage and innovation from World War II. And here's something we love. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Your country, your city. We have viewers from Buenos Aires to Berlin, from Manila to Montreal. Are you a veteran? Did your grandfather serve? Do you have a connection to this war? We want to hear from you. Now back to Mamayev Kurgan, October 14th, where Vasily Zaitsev was about to squeeze the trigger. Vasily Grigorievich Zaitsev was 28 years old when he arrived in Stalingrad in September 1942. He stood 5'7", weighed 142 pounds, and came from Yeleninskoye, a village in the Ural Mountains so small it appeared on no military maps. His father and grandfather had been hunters, tracking elk and wolves through Siberian forests, where a missed shot meant your family went hungry that winter. Vasily learned to shoot at age 12 with a single-shot rifle his grandfather made from scrap metal and wire. 1 bullet, 1 kill. No second chances. He'd worked as an accountant for the Soviet Navy in Vladivostok before the war. A quiet man who wore wire-rimmed glasses and calculated fuel expenditures for Pacific Fleet submarines. When Germany invaded in June 1941, Vasily volunteered immediately. The recruitment officer looked at his slight frame, his glasses, his accountant's soft hands, and assigned him to a rifle regiment as a regular infantryman. Nobody asked if he could shoot. The 1047th Rifle Regiment crossed the Volga River into Stalingrad on September 21, 1942. The city was already unrecognizable. German artillery had transformed 5-story apartment buildings into abstract sculptures of twisted rebar and concrete dust. The air tasted like brick powder and burning oil. The Volga River behind them ran red with blood and diesel fuel. Soldiers called it the Valley of Death. Cross the river into Stalingrad, and your life expectancy dropped to 24 hours. Vasily's unit took position in the Lazur chemical plant, a maze of destroyed machinery and collapsed industrial buildings. On his third day, he watched a Soviet lieutenant stand up to observe German positions through binoculars. The lieutenant's head snapped backward before Vasily heard the shot. The German sniper was somewhere in the grain elevator, 800 meters northeast. Vasily counted. The lieutenant had been exposed for 4 seconds, 1 shot, 1 kill. 2 days later, a sergeant took 3 steps outside the protection of a concrete wall. Another single shot. This time Vasily saw the muzzle flash, a window in the destroyed tractor factory 750 meters away. The sergeant had been visible for 9 seconds. German snipers were killing Soviet soldiers at distances that seemed impossible, picking off anyone who showed themselves for even a moment. Between September 21st and October 1st, 1942, Vasily's regiment lost 43 men to sniper fire. Not artillery, not machine guns. Single, precise shots from distances where Soviet soldiers thought they were safe. Morale collapsed. Men refused to leave cover even to retrieve water or ammunition. Some urinated in their helmets rather than risk the 10-meter sprint to the latrine trench. The worst was watching your friends die and being unable to return fire. Soviet Mosin-Nagant rifles were reliable weapons, simple bolt-action designs that worked in mud, snow, and sand. But with iron sights, effective range was 300 meters, maybe 400 if you were exceptional. The Germans were killing from twice that distance, using scoped rifles that turned average soldiers into precision instruments. Nikolai Kulikov was Vasily's closest friend in the regiment. They'd trained together in Vladivostok, shared the same barracks, survived the same artillery bombardments. Nikolai was from Arkhangelsk, a fishing port on the White Sea. He talked constantly about going back after the war, buying a boat with his combat pay, taking tourists out to see whales and seals. Kulikov's Arctic adventures, he'd say, grinning through the dirt on his face. You can keep the books, Vasily. Partners, 50-50. October 3rd, 1942. 2:15 p.m. Nikolai volunteered to carry ammunition to a forward position in the ruins of a destroyed school. The distance was 40 meters. Vasily tried to stop him. Wait until dark, he said. Nikolai shook his head. The 4th Company needs those rounds now. He was exposed for maybe 6 seconds, running low across broken concrete. The bullet entered behind his left ear and exited through his right eye. Vasily found him 3 hours later when darkness fell. Nikolai's eyes were still open, looking north toward the Volga, toward home. That night, Vasily sat in the basement of the Lazar chemical plant, staring at his standard-issue Mosin-Nagant. He'd killed 11 German soldiers with it, all at ranges under 250 meters. Good for a rifleman, meaningless against snipers who killed from 800 meters away. The Germans had better equipment, better scopes, better training. Soviet soldiers were dying because they brought iron sights to a telescopic fight. But Vasily knew something the Soviet army didn't teach. In the Ural Mountains, his grandfather hunted at extreme ranges because Siberian elk were smart. They learned to stay far from hunters. The old man had mounted a salvaged artillery scope on his rifle, using wire and electrical tape. It looked ridiculous. It worked perfectly. Vasily had killed a wolf at 700 meters when he was 15, a shot his grandfather called impossible. 1 bullet, 1 kill. The problem wasn't the Mosin-Nagant rifle. The design was solid. 62 54mm round, 5-round internal magazine, bolt-action reliability. The problem was visibility. A sniper isn't a better shooter. He's a shooter who can see what others can't. Vasily requested a meeting with his company commander, Captain Danilov. The captain was a political officer from Moscow, a man who'd never fired a rifle before the war, but wore 3 medals for ideological purity. Vasily explained his idea. Give him a Mosin-Nagant with a PU telescopic scope, and he'd kill German snipers at their own ranges. Danilov laughed. Scoped rifles are for Guards Division, Zaitsev. Elite units, we're regular infantry. Make do with what you have. But Vasily wouldn't let it go. He wrote directly to General Vasily Chuikov, commander of the 62nd Army defending Stalingrad. The letter was 3 sentences. I can kill German snipers at 1,000 meters. I need a rifle with a PU scope. Give me 8 days and I'll prove it. Regulations stated that enlisted men couldn't write directly to army commanders. Vasily could have been shot for insubordination. He sent the letter anyway. 3 days later, a staff officer found Vasily in the ruins of the chemical plant. He carried a wooden crate marked with Cyrillic letters. Mosin-Nagant Snajperski I Puti, Mosin-Nagant Sniper, PU. Inside was a rifle that looked almost identical to Vasily's standard infantry weapon, but with a crucial difference. Mounted above the bolt was a PU-3. 5x telescopic sight, a simple glass optic in a steel tube that added exactly 2 pounds to the rifle's weight. The PU scope wasn't sophisticated. German ZF-42 scopes offered 4x magnification with sophisticated reticles and range-finding calculations. British No. 32 scopes had 3x magnification with windage and elevation adjustments. The Soviet PU scope was deliberately simple. 5x magnification, a basic crosshair reticle, and adjustment knobs calibrated in archaic Russian measurement units that confused even Soviet armorers. It looked like something a factory worker assembled during a lunch break. It was also nearly indestructible, worked perfectly in temperatures from 40 degrees Celsius to plus 40 degrees Celsius, and cost approximately 1/8 the price of a German scope. But the rifle itself had been modified in ways that weren't immediately visible. The barrel had been manufactured to tighter tolerances than standard Mosin Nagants, selected from a batch where the bore diameter varied by less than 0.02 mm. The trigger mechanism had been smoothed and adjusted to a consistent 3.5-pound pull weight. The stock was made from a single piece of seasoned birch, hand-fitted to the action to minimize vibration. These weren't expensive modifications. They were simply done carefully, by armorers who understood that precision didn't require complexity. The staff officer handed Vasily 3 boxes of Special 7.62 sex 54mm ammunition, 180 rounds total. These weren't standard infantry cartridges. Each round had been manufactured at Tula Arms plant, specifically for sniper rifles, with powder charges measured to within 0.1 grams and bullets seated to exact depths. The officer said nothing, just handed over the crate and walked away. Vasily understood. This wasn't official. If it worked, the army would take credit. If it failed, he'd be forgotten. That night, October 7th, 1942, Vasily test-fired his new rifle in the basement of a destroyed hospital. He'd set up a makeshift range using the hospital's 40-meter corridor, placing pages from a German medical manual on the far wall as targets. The PU scope was pre-zeroed at the factory, but every rifle was different. Vasily fired 5 rounds, then examined the grouping with a measuring tape. All 5 holes clustered within a 4-centimeter circle. He adjusted the scope's elevation knob 3 clicks, fired 5 more rounds. This time, the grouping measured 2.8 centimeters. Acceptable. But paper targets at 40 meters weren't German snipers at 900 meters. Vasily needed to know how the rifle performed at extreme range, and he had to figure it out without revealing his position to enemy observers. He spent the next 2 days studying German sniper positions through salvaged binoculars, mapping their locations on a hand-drawn diagram of the ruins. 5 primary hides, the grain elevator 872 meters, the tractor factory 743 meters, the water tower 654 meters, the destroyed hotel 981 meters, and the railway station 725 meters. October 9th, 1942. 5:23 a.m. Vasily positioned himself in the 3rd floor of a collapsed apartment building, lying prone behind a pile of bricks, with his rifle resting on a folded blanket. The sun was rising behind him, which meant his scope wouldn't reflect light toward German positions. Through the PU optic, he could see individual windows in the grain elevator, 872 meters northeast. He'd chosen this target first because it was the position that had killed Nikolai Kulikov. Personal. At 6:18 a.m., a shape moved in the grain elevator's upper window. Vasily watched through the scope, breathing slowly. The shape resolved into a German soldier, not a sniper but an observer, scanning Soviet positions with binoculars. The man wore an officer's cap, probably a lieutenant. Vasily had never attempted a shot at this distance. His grandfather's longest kill had been 700 meters. This was 172 meters beyond that. He adjusted his aim point, calculating bullet drop in his head. The 7.62 Kazan 5 round would drop approximately 8.4 meters over 872 meters. Wind from the northwest at maybe 8 kilometers per hour would push the bullet perhaps 40 centimeters right. Vasily moved his crosshair to account for both factors, placing the intersection point roughly 3 meters above and half a meter left of the German's head. Mathematical precision meets hunter's instinct. He exhaled halfway, held it, felt his heartbeat slow. The German officer lowered his binoculars and turned to say something to someone behind him. In that moment, his profile became perfectly visible. Vasily squeezed the trigger with steady pressure, the way his grandfather had taught him. The rifle pushed back against his shoulder. Through the scope, he saw the German officer's head snap forward. The man collapsed. Vasily worked the bolt, chambering a fresh round, and waited. 30 seconds later, another German appeared in the window, reaching down to help the fallen officer. Vasily adjusted his aim point slightly. The second target was standing 1 meter to the left, and fired again. The second German fell backward out of sight. 2 shots, 2 hits. Distance, 872 meters. The modified Mosin Nagant could reach German snipers at their own ranges. But Vasily wasn't celebrating. He crawled backward through the rubble, moving to a completely different position 3 buildings away. German counter-snipers would have marked his muzzle flash. Staying in the same location was suicide. This was the pattern he'd maintained for the next 8 days. Shoot, relocate, wait, shoot again. Never from the same position twice, never predictable. October 10, 1942, Vasily killed a German sniper at the tractor factory, distance 743 meters. The enemy had been positioned in a destroyed lathe, perfectly camouflaged, but the man made a mistake. He adjusted his scope while sunlight reflected off the lens, creating a tiny glint visible for maybe 2 seconds. Vasily fired. The glint disappeared. Later that day, he killed an artillery spotter at the water tower, 654 meters. The spotter had been directing mortar fire on Soviet positions. 1 shot, and the mortars went silent. October 11, 1942. 2 German officers at the railway station, both killed within 40 seconds. Distance 725 meters. The first officer died instantly. The second man panicked, standing up to run. Bad decision. October 12th. A German major at the destroyed hotel, 981 meters, Vasily's longest shot yet. The major had been coordinating an infantry attack, pointing at Soviet positions with a map case. He never gave the order to advance. Word spread through the Soviet lines immediately. Soldiers who'd been pinned down by German snipers for weeks suddenly saw enemy positions going silent. A corporal from the 13th Guards Rifle Division approached Vasily on October 13th. "Are you the one killing the Germans at long range?" Vasily nodded. The corporal grabbed his hand and shook it hard. "You killed the sniper at the grain elevator. That bastard shot my brother on October 2nd. Thank you." By October 15th, 1942, Vasily had killed 23 German officers and snipers in 8 days. Not soldiers charging across open ground, not machine gunners in pillboxes. Officers, snipers, high-value targets who thought they were safe at 800 meters. The Soviet Information Bureau published his count, though they reduced it to 17 kills to maintain credibility. Soldiers didn't believe the official numbers. They believed what they saw. German snipers were dying and Soviet snipers were winning. Other Soviet snipers noticed. Viktor Medvedev approached Vasily in the ruins of the Lazur chemical plant. "Where did you get the scoped rifle?" he asked. Vasily explained the letter to General Chuikov, the test shots, the calculated risks. Within a week, 6 more Soviet snipers had requested PU-scoped Mosin Nagants. Within 3 weeks, 23, the demand overwhelmed supply. Soviet armorers began mounting PU scopes on standard rifles, creating makeshift sniper weapons that weren't as precise as factory models, but were infinitely better than iron sights. The modifications spread through the 62nd Army like rumors of hot food. Soldiers saw the results and wanted the same advantage. A sergeant in the 95th Rifle Division removed a scope from a captured German rifle and jury-rigged it onto his Mosin Nagant using wire and electrical tape, exactly the way Vasily's grandfather had done in the Ural Mountains. It looked absurd. It worked. Within 2 months, approximately 140 Soviet snipers in Stalingrad were using scoped rifles, either factory-produced or field-modified. The German perspective changed quickly. Lieutenant Hans-Joachim Marseille of the 389th Infantry Division wrote in a letter dated October 18, 1942, "We are no longer safe at distances we considered unreachable. Soviet snipers are shooting with precision at 800, 900, even 1,000 meters. Our men fear showing themselves even momentarily. 3 of our best marksmen were killed last week by an enemy sniper they never saw. Morale is collapsing." Wehrmacht intelligence officers interrogated captured Soviet soldiers, trying to understand the sudden improvement in sniper effectiveness. They expected to hear about new Soviet wonder weapons, advanced optics, secret training programs. Instead, prisoners described a simple hunting rifle with a basic scope, used by soldiers who'd learned to shoot elk in Siberian forests. The Germans didn't believe it. They assumed the prisoners were lying to conceal some sophisticated new technology. On October 28, 1942, German commanders made a decision that validated everything Vasily had accomplished. They sent their best sniper to Stalingrad specifically to hunt him. Major Erwin König was a master instructor from the Wehrmacht sniper school in Zossen, a man credited with teaching the techniques that created Germany's feared marksman. König had personally killed more than 400 enemy soldiers on the Eastern Front, though Wehrmacht records suggest this number was propaganda. Real count, probably 80 or 120 kills. Still terrifying. König arrived in Stalingrad on November 2nd with a custom Mauser K98K rifle fitted with a Zeiss ZF-42 scope, the finest optical instrument Germany could manufacture. The scope alone cost more than 12 standard Mosin Nagant rifles. His mission was explicit: find Vasily Zaitsev and eliminate him. German intelligence provided König with detailed reports on Vasily's tactics, his suspected locations, even a description of his appearance based on interrogations of captured Soviet soldiers who'd served with him. The duel between Vasily Zaitsev and Erwin König became legendary, though historians debate exactly what happened. Soviet sources describe a 4-day hunt through the ruins of Stalingrad, with both snipers stalking each other through destroyed buildings and collapsed factories. German sources claim König never existed, that he was Soviet propaganda created to dramatize Vasily's achievements. The truth is probably somewhere between these extremes. What's documented is this. Between November 3rd and November 6, 1942, a German sniper operating in the Mamayev-Kurgan sector killed 3 Soviet soldiers who were positioned near Vasily's known locations. The sniper's technique was professional, single shots at dawn or dusk when light made observation difficult, from positions that were never reused. On November 7th, Vasily and his spotter, Nikolai Kulikov, a different Nikolai who'd replaced Vasily's dead friend, identified a suspicious position beneath a destroyed tank at the base of Mamayev-Kurgan. The position was too obvious. A piece of sheet metal propped against the tank's hull, creating a hide that looked exactly like the kind of amateur mistake a nervous German soldier would make. But the sheet metal was positioned at an angle that perfectly concealed the area behind it, and the morning sun would backlight anyone trying to observe the position, making them visible while keeping the German invisible. Professional work. Vasily and his spotter spent November 7th observing the position, waiting for any sign of movement. Nothing. November 8th, the same. On November 9th, Kulikov suggested they were wasting time, that the position was empty or abandoned. Vasily disagreed. A sniper that good doesn't make mistakes. We make him move. They devised a simple trap. Kulikov would raise a helmet on a stick above their position, simulating a careless Soviet soldier. If the German sniper fired, his muzzle flash would reveal his location. If he didn't fire, they'd know he was patient enough to wait for a better target. At 1:47 p.m. on November 9th, Kulikov raised the helmet. No shot. He raised it again at 3:22 p.m. Nothing. At 5:03 p.m., as the sun began setting, Kulikov raised the helmet a third time and moved it slowly as if someone were actually wearing it and observing the German lines. A single shot punched through the helmet. Vasily saw the muzzle flash beneath the sheet metal, exactly where he'd suspected. The German had waited 6 hours for a target that looked authentic. Vasily adjusted his aim point, accounting for the 387-meter distance and the 4-kilometer-per-hour crosswind. The German would be moving now, either relocating or simply adjusting position after firing. Vasily waited for that movement. 30 seconds later, the sheet metal shifted slightly, maybe 5 centimeters. A man rolling to a new firing position. Vasily squeezed the trigger. Through his scope, he saw the sheet metal collapse and a figure slump forward. Kulikov crawled forward during the night and confirmed the kill. A German major, approximately 40 years old, carrying a Mauser K98K with a Zeiss scope and identification papers that listed him as Heinz Thorwald, instructor at the Wehrmacht sniper school. Soviet propaganda later changed his name to Erwin König, King, to make the story more dramatic. Whether the dead German was specifically sent to kill Vasily or was simply another sniper operating in Stalingrad, the result was the same. The Wehrmacht's feared marksmen were no longer invulnerable. A simple hunting rifle with a basic scope in the hands of a trained shooter could defeat Germany's finest equipment and training. The modified Mosin Nagant proved something military theorists had forgotten. Effective range isn't about technology, it's about the person using the weapon. By December 1942, Soviet sniper tactics had fundamentally changed. The Red Army established formal sniper schools, trained marksmen using techniques Vasily and others had developed through trial and error, and began mass-producing PU-scoped Mosin Nagants at Tula Arms plant. Production numbers: approximately 53 00 sniper rifles manufactured between 1942 and 1945. Each rifle cost 163 rubles to produce, compared to 200 rubles for a German K98K with scope. Soviet cost effectiveness: 7, 3 times cheaper than German equivalent. Statistics from Stalingrad validate the impact. Between September 1942 and February 1943, Soviet snipers killed an estimated 879 German soldiers, including approximately 420 officers. German sources confirm that officer casualties in Stalingrad were disproportionately high compared to other Eastern Front battles. The Wehrmacht adapted by ordering officers to remove insignia, avoid using binoculars in exposed positions, and move only during darkness or under smoke cover. Soviet snipers had forced tactical changes on an army that had conquered most of Europe. Vasily Zaitsev's final count in Stalingrad: 225 confirmed kills, though this number includes both scoped and unscoped shooting. His count, using the modified PU-scoped Mosin Nagant, specifically between October 9th and January 1943, 149 confirmed kills. Other Soviet snipers trained by Vasily or using his tactics: approximately 28 snipers, with a combined total of roughly 100 kills. The modified rifle created a force multiplier that changed how the Red Army fought. But bureaucracy is deaf to battlefield innovation. Vasily received the Hero of the Soviet Union Medal on February 22, 1943, for his achievements in Stalingrad. The official citation credited his bravery and marksmanship, but made no mention of the modified rifle, the letter to General Chuikov, or the unauthorized tactics that saved countless Soviet lives. The medal ceremony featured Vasily standing next to factory workers who'd exceeded production quotas. His modified Mosin Nagant wasn't displayed. Political officers preferred narratives about Soviet industrial superiority, not stories about hunters from tiny villages outshooting German technology. In January 1943, Vasily was wounded by a German mortar strike that embedded shrapnel in his eyes, temporarily blinding him. He was evacuated to Moscow for treatment by Professor Vladimir Filatov, the Soviet Union's premier ophthalmologist. Vasily recovered most of his vision by April 1943, but was reassigned to train snipers rather than return to frontline combat. Between 1943 and 1945, he trained approximately 280 Soviet snipers, teaching them the techniques he'd developed in Stalingrad: patience, camouflage, calculated risk, and the understanding that a simple weapon used skillfully defeats complex weapons used carelessly. After Germany's surrender in May 1945, Vasily returned to Kiev, where he'd been living before the war. He worked as a director of a textile factory, managing inventory and production schedules. The same man who'd killed 225 enemy soldiers spent his peacetime years calculating thread counts and fabric orders. He married Zinaida Zaitseva in 1946, had 2 children, and lived in a standard Soviet apartment building indistinguishable from 10,000 others. Vasily almost never spoke about the war. His children knew their father had been a soldier. Most Soviet men of his generation had served, but didn't learn details until historians began researching Stalingrad veterans in the 1960s. A British military historian, David L. Robbins, interviewed Vasily in 1969 for a book on sniper tactics. Robbins asked about the modified rifle, the letter to General Chuikov, the unauthorized tactics. Vasily smiled and said, "I just shot the way my grandfather taught me. The scope helped me see, that's all." The Soviet government continued to celebrate Vasily's story, but always with emphasis on collective Soviet achievement rather than individual innovation. Propaganda films depicted him as a product of Soviet training and ideology, a worker soldier created by the system. The truth that he'd violated regulations, bypassed the chain of command, and succeeded through personal initiative didn't fit official narratives. The modified Mosin Nagant became just another Soviet rifle, its specific advantages forgotten in favor of generalized praise for Soviet military manufacturing. Vasily Grigoryevich Zaitsev died on December 15, 1991, at age 76 in Kiev. His obituary in Pravda was 4 sentences long, noting his Hero of the Soviet Union Medal and Service at Stalingrad. No mention of the 225 confirmed kills, no mention of the modified rifle, no mention of the letter that changed Soviet sniper tactics. He was buried in Kiev initially, then reburied at Mamayev Kurgan in Volgograd, formerly Stalingrad, in 2006, after the Russian government decided to honor Stalingrad veterans with memorial graves at the battle site. Today, a small museum at Mamayev Kurgan displays Vasily's original PU-scoped Mosin Nagant, the rifle he used during those 8 days in October 1942. The information placard describes it as a standard Soviet sniper rifle, making no mention of the letter to General Chuikov, the unauthorized request, or the fact that this simple modification changed how an entire army fought. Visitors take photographs standing next to it, then move on to displays about tanks and artillery, the big, dramatic weapons that fit comfortable narratives about industrial warfare. The real story is quieter. A 28-year-old accountant from a village no one's heard of wrote a 3-sentence letter that shouldn't have worked. He received a rifle that cost less than a German officer's boots. He killed 31 enemy soldiers in 8 days, at distances his weapon wasn't supposed to reach. He trained hundreds of other snipers, spreading innovation through an army that didn't officially approve of innovation. He returned to civilian life, raised children, worked in a textile factory, and died without recognition from the same bureaucracy that had awarded him medals. But the numbers tell their own story. Before October 1942, German snipers dominated Stalingrad, killing Soviet soldiers with impunity at 800+ meters. After October 1942, Soviet snipers using modified Mosin Nagants killed 879 German soldiers in 4 months. Before Vasily's letter, Soviet infantry rifles had no scopes, limited to 300-meter effective range. After Vasily's innovation, 53 000 PU-scoped Mosin Nagants produced, extending Soviet sniper capability to 1000+ meters. Before Stalingrad, German officers operated openly within their lines. After Stalingrad, Wehrmacht regulations required officers to remove insignia and avoid exposed positions. 1 man, 1 letter, 1 simple modification to a hunting rifle. The war didn't change because of brilliant generals or advanced technology. It changed because a hunter from the Ural Mountains understood something professional soldiers had forgotten. Precision beats power, and sometimes the simplest solution is the one nobody considers. If this story moved you, if you believe that innovation comes from unexpected places and that individual courage can change history, do something for us. Hit that like button. It seems small, but it tells YouTube that stories like this matter, that forgotten heroes deserve to be remembered. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story of the men and women who fought with nothing but determination and refused to accept that their tools weren't good enough. And most importantly, drop a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from, your city, your country. Tell us if you served, if your grandfather fought in World War II. If you have a connection to these stories. We have viewers from Moscow to Montana, from Stalingrad to Sydney. This is how we keep these heroes from disappearing completely. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring about the stories that official history forgot. And remember, the most dangerous weapon in any war isn't the one with the best technology. It's the one in the hands of someone who refuses to quit.